So what we're talking about tonight is how a good CRM implementation can really help your nonprofit a lot and take it up to the next level. I'd like to ask how many are here from an organization that already has a CRM? Okay, a few. How many are here because they would like to have a CRM? Okay, and amongst those who have CRMs, how many are using something like Salesforce, no, Civi CRM, one or two? What other ones? Do you want to just call it out?
Sugar
CRM?
Yeah. Tapestry.
Okay, eTapestry. Anyone using Nation Builder? Not yet? Okay, great. So it's that gives me a good sense of how to pitch my talk. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is what exactly a CRM is, what it does for you, and I'm going to dip into some of the following topics: getting together a project team, choosing a process. There's various ways you can go about doing it. Probably focusing a little more than the other areas on determining needs, and then talking a little bit about scoping phases. CRM sounds a little bit like that other acronym CMS. So a CMS, a content management system, that's your website. It does other things as well, but it's especially good for text, images, communications, the content of the communications. A CRM is a little bit more oriented towards the interactions that you have as an organization with your stakeholders, your constituents. So when someone buys something like a membership, when they get sent an email, when they come to an event, all of that is a transaction or an interaction. And so CRMs became important starting in the banking sector back in the late 90s. And then it moved from the for-profit space, where it's customer relationship management, into the nonprofit space. Can everyone hear me? I've got a little bit of a cold, yeah? A little bit louder? Okay. So the idea is that you're going to get a 360-degree view of everything to do with that person. You want to know about all the in-person interactions, all the online interactions, the phone interactions from the call center. Every sort of interaction should be in your CRM. The direct mail you mail out from the mail house, all of that should be in there. And what that does is it facilitates understanding what's going on with all of these people that are concerned about your organization and its issues, and it allows you to understand them better and hopefully interact with them in a way that they want better in terms of their relationship with you. So better targeting, better customization of the pages that they go to. And also with automation, lower cost. Now the problem with CRMs, some implementation challenges is normally they're very large systems and they go right across the organization. And so instead of being able to just deal with one department and the few people in that department, it's actually trying to get all the different departments to work together. And so that leads to turf wars, that leads to trying to get data that was collected for different purposes all working together. It often is best if you approach a CRM project as a time to rethink how you're doing stuff. You used to be doing it one way, then you got a new system. Whenever you're trying to do a major enterprise level change like a CRM system, it's time to rethink your processes and look at all of your data as well. Because you're often replacing many different things, whether it's a legacy access system, Excel spreadsheets, SurveyMonkey, Eventbrite, all these different things, they all have their own data, their own ways of doing it, and you're trying to link them all together. And so you have to come up with standards for how you're going to, put in your phone numbers and different things like that so that they can all work together nicely. That was a very 30,000 level idea of what a CRM is about. Here is a list of the kinds of functions that you would find in a nonprofit CRM. So a big one is email subscriptions. That's just important because that's usually the beginning of the funnel or ladder of engagement. That's the first thing someone would do to actively give you information about them and start taking a deeper relationship with your organization. Donations is up with a little star beside it because normally the fundraisers are really concerned about your lists and they want to make money for your organization because you can't do anything unless you have some money for staff and other things. Memberships, event registrations, volunteer management. If your organization is more operationally focused, where you have clients with multiple interactions, then like maybe a homeless shelter kind of place, then you might have client case management. Grant seeking, some organizations are going to try and track lots of places where they're applying to foundations. Grant giving, I've done some work there with arts organizations that give out grants, nurses, education, stipends, other things like that. SMS is growing. You can do bulk SMSs now the same way you can do bulk emails. Fax is a little bit old style technology, but it's still around for trying to campaign to affect change at a political level. Petitions are an important way to gather a big list of people who are interested in your topic so that you can communicate with them again. Also, CRMs now have virtual phone banks so that you can try and get people out to your fundraising dinner or do things around election day, getting people out. I'm working with, most likely working with an organization to set up inbound phone calls. It's a municipality and the mayor's office wants to track all the requests that are coming in to make sure they're responded to quickly. Not only is there social media sharing now, there's deeper integrations that are available that will tell you what your constituents are interested in terms of hashtags they're using, and that can automate more of the interactions where if they are retweeting something of yours, then you automatically follow them. So a much deeper level of integration is starting to come about. And then you can have online chat things. So I'm just going to open up and give you a few very quick overviews. So number one. So this is number 4. If you just click on the little plus down there, number 1. Okay, so here's an organization. It's a nonprofit. They actually are a college out in Alberta, and they use memberships to manage registration of people who are allowed to provide dental technology and dental technician services. And they've got all sorts of very exotic membership types, but that's something that you would normally find in a CRM that's designed for a nonprofit. You can find modules for ones that are for-profit oriented that can do some of this, or you can create it as sort of a subscription type of service. Want to go to the second one? So this Beaverbrook Foundation, some of you may remember that the Vimy Memorial was celebrating the Vimy Battle of Vimy Ridge, where Canada became its nation in World War I. So this is an organization that sends over a couple dozen high school students every year. And so they wanted an application form for these high school students. There's no money given to them, but they do get this free trip and other things. So if you go down, you can see that they have to provide information about their school, they provide whatever kind of CV they have, and more importantly, a little essay and so on. So just, so this is how they evaluate. So that's one. Maybe go to number 3 there, Peter Julian. So I'm working with the NDP caucus chair federally, and so this is what we call a call to action. They've got several types: a petition, a survey, signing up for a subscription to his critic area newsletter or his local one, and can't remember the fourth one. So if you close in the upper red or upper orange, yeah, if you close that up, and then go down a little bit, scroll down. So there are different types of actions there. So we've got subscriptions and then events. So inviting people to events. He's going to be doing a tour through Quebec around clean energy. And so this is a typical use where you're combining both content management and relationship management. So the content is essential to get them interested, get them coming there, and then you want to start interacting with them more. And so the stuff in the action tab and even some of the other stuff is CRM related. And actually, since we're logged in here, maybe if you could go to City CRM. And I'm just going to show you the kinds of functionality that you should be thinking about for donation management. So under, oh, it's not here. Can you go over to Beaverbrook? So we've turned it off. So he's, this is the second tab, sorry. And, okay, maybe the first tab since we're logged in the first tab. And go to contributions, manage contribution pages. And then just beside administrative fees, click configure over on the very far right. And so just go to title and settings. I want to suggest that you don't want only to be able to have a contribution accepted, you want recurring contributions. If you go down far, I keep going, you want to have things like, if you click on honoree section enabled, there's a little check here, maybe I'll do this.
Oh.
Yeah, that one. So you might want to have donations in honor of or in memoriam of. So another client of mine is the Melanoma Network of Canada. And so in memoriam donations are going to be important for them and in honor of people who are fighting the cancer. And so sharing in social media, if you go up again, I just want to take you over to show you a few other things. Under tell a friend, that's it, okay. Turn on tell a friend. So here is where after someone has taken an action, whether it's made a donation or come to an event, that's when you want to be trying to encourage them to get others involved as well. And so you really want to have fairly astute integration with social media, because it's only at certain points that you're going to be in the cycle of interactions that it's really important to have that sharing part. If we go up to the top again, I just want to do a few more things. Premiums, you want to be able to support things like giving away cups or t-shirts for certain levels. Widgets are when you want your site where you're trying to do your campaign to raise $10,000 to provide a widget that other people can post on their sites. And then personal campaigns often has different names, but that's where I'm going to do Run for the Cure, and I want to sign up my friends to, I'm going to raise $10,000 or $1,000. And so I have my own little campaign explaining why I'm doing it, and I send out stuff to my contacts. So that's just one area among that big list, if we can go back to the presentation. So in all of these areas, there's going to be a lot of details. Donations is probably one that has the most on here, but there's lots of functionality. And when you're developing your requirements, you need to drill down into those smaller things and talk to the different people involved in those areas in your organization, and then you need to prioritize them. And sometimes you're going to find, oh, I get that for free with this product, and so that's a nice to have. Other times you say, I can't live without being able to do recurring donations. And so if it doesn't have that, we have to veto that product. Yep?
Can you make a change to that? Like, can you change, if it doesn't have ongoing donations, can you ever code in or not?
So I'm here to talk not about Civi CRM so much. I'm an expert in that, and I'm doing examples from my clients. Normally, you can ask for additional modules from something like Blackbaud, Razor's Edge, and you'd have to pay a bit more. With open source software like Sugar CRM or Civi CRM, you can pay a developer or have your staff do it. Or you can put it on a feature list in any sort of organization. So in each of these areas, you can think of that each of the areas, especially on the left, as identifying a type of constituent. So a subscriber, a donor, a member, a volunteer, someone who came to an event. Those are particular kinds of constituents. And you probably want to interact differently with them if they're a client at your homeless shelter compared to a donor or a granting foundation. And so you want to understand your segmentation of your constituents and how you're going to engage them differently depending on if it's one type of constituent or another. So here are some other ones that aren't always thought of. So elected officials, or maybe if you're an environmental group, heads of big polluting companies, are going to be important advocacy targets, and they're a stakeholder. You're trying to convince bad guys to change their ways. Sponsors, funders, board members. I'm going to try and speed up a bit here. Coalition members, so let's say your group is part of a coalition, or you have partners with you delivering services. They're important for your CRM. Often you'll have a small number of media people in the city or across the country to talk about your issue. I wouldn't suggest that these are the best things for putting out press releases. Normally a service can keep up to date much better than you will be able to do. So that was an overview of what what CRM functionality for a nonprofit might be able to do, and you probably only need to do some of that. So those are to help you brainstorming later. Now we're going to talk about a team. How many of your organizations have less than 3 people on staff? How many have 4 to 10 on staff? How many have 10 to 20 on staff? And how many 20 to 100? How many over 100? So we've got a big spread here. It's really going to affect how you put together a project team and an implementation plan. What size of organization, what its corporate culture is, organizational culture I should say. Is it something that's been around for 50 years and has a very formal process where we document everything first, get approvals from 3 levels, or are we able to quite quickly decide, okay, this is what we're going to do for the next month, and just start doing it. So you need to be aware of your organizational culture when you're putting together a team. It's essential that you have an executive sponsor who can have the vision that will assist in any organizational change. They are the ones who make the money decisions. That would be your executive director most of the time. Key functional managers, because you want to go across the organization, you have to get the buy-in and appropriate people from the different areas. Now, it's not a top-down thing. And actually, a lot of times in your organization, it's going to be the secretary who's been there for 25 years who actually knows how everything works rather than her manager. And so that kind of a person who has that institutional history and memory and knows how things are actually done is a really key person to involve in this process. And you also want to involve people who are maybe power users as well as, I don't like the computer, I can barely highlight and bold my stuff in Word.
Can you speak up because I can't hear you?
Sure, sorry.
The last phrase, like
So you want people who are non-tech savvy, who have trouble formatting in Word and using, Amazon.com, as well as people who are power users in, formulas in Excel. Okay? So, and the reason is you have to meet the needs of all the people in your organization. And you don't want just people who are wanting more and more features. You want the people who want simplicity and ease of understanding on your team as well. So you need to put together a team that spans your organization in a functional way, as well as top to bottom kind of way. I would recommend not too big a group. 5 people is a good working group. 6 to 8 is reasonable as well, but then you're starting to, have more talk than doing. Now, in terms of technical expertise, the larger organizations here are going to have IT departments with lots of staff. For example, one of my clients who uses Civi CRM a lot, the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, they have, 6 to 10 people in their IT department, bigger than many of your organizations. And so they are doing a whole bunch of stuff in-house. They bring me in for strategy, and they farm out development of new features to me. Whereas smaller organizations like the Melanoma Network, I'm kind of doing all of it. They don't have a big budget, and so I'm getting them to do the data cleanup, okay? Because they know their data better, and they can reduce their cost on the data migration by cleaning it up themselves. You need to take an assessment of your current capabilities in-house, availability of your IT people, because they're probably run off their feet already, and you might need to bring in a consultant either for high-level advice, or for providing the continuity and providing the resources, the human power to get it all done. And you can do mix and match, as I was mentioning with the RMAO. In terms of the team, although I wouldn't consider them part of the implementation team, you want to be cycling back to users and other stakeholders throughout this process, either with an early survey if it's a very long, large organization to identify requirements, or just to get feedback on the forms and how usable they are. So I would say if you're a larger, more formal organization, you're going to tend to use more of a conventional waterfall methodology. If you're a smaller organization, younger folks, then you might use Agile Scrum, which is moving out from being just a software technology or methodology to being used for other sorts of project management processes. And there's a various, it's a continuum. And so you can understand phased projects using conventional waterfall in each of the phases as sort of somewhere in between, an iterative process. And in both of these, you're going to need to identify either the requirements or the product backlog early on before you get started. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that. I'm going to talk about 2 ways to think of requirements. I like to talk about it as top-down and bottom-up. So top-down, you start with your organization's mission. Like, what are you about? What are you really trying to accomplish in the world? We want to get rid of hunger in the city. And then use that to figure out how you should be interacting with which groups of people. Tierney, can I ask you to open up the Daily Bread?
Yeah, do you happen to know the URL of it?
No, it's fairly deep.
Okay.
So if you just do Google Daily Bread Food Bank mission, I think you need mission as well. Yeah. Okay, so they have their vision statement and then their mission. Now you want your mission, normally missions would be somewhere between 2 sentences, and this is on the long side. But if we go through it, the first and second paragraph, I'm not going to read them out, they actually tell you who they're trying to identify as constituents. And you can imagine from this statement the kind of interactions you're going to have with someone like a client of a food bank, or someone like a foundation, or government policies. You're going to have people that you're trying to affect with policy maneuvers. So you might have think tanks, you might have the minister involved. So going from that mission statement will allow you to think of the 2 things going back to the private sector sales model of CRM, the sales funnel. So who are the people that you're bringing in just a bit, the big group, which is subscribers, to maybe donors, to maybe volunteers. Normally you have several funnels, one to cultivate volunteers, another one to cultivate donors, another one maybe to cultivate activists, another one maybe to do, I don't know, board work. So if we can go back to the, so identifying your different types of constituents, what interactions form the relationships, and then the ladder of engagement. And then what are the priorities for your organization? Is it really to focus first and foremost on changing policy at Queen's Park, or is it first and foremost to get some food to people this week? And so your mission statement helps you focus your energy. And all of the time in these projects, it's not always more and more. Nonprofits have limited resources, and you have to realize if we're going to start doing something new, we have to say what we're not going to do unless we have more resources. And so trying to use your mission statement to say what we're not going to do, what's not our main focus, is important. Okay? How many of you have not heard or have heard of ladders of engagement and have not heard that expression? Okay, so a ladder of engagement, normally you have at the bottom, at the base, people who aren't very engaged in your organization, and then you try and think of the first step they would take to interact with you. And I mentioned already, subscription might be one. Another one might be coming and using a service of yours. Those are fairly easy steps, and after they get to know you more, then you might want to consider the next step, which is making a donation perhaps. And at each one of these steps up the ladder of engagement, to maybe being a volunteer, being a board member, becoming staff, I don't know, whatever, you want to make sure that there is a nice value proposition, to use private sector language again. Why is it that someone's going to bother to subscribe to the newsletter? They must get some value from it. Why is it that they're going to bother to make a donation? You have to convince them that they're going to get something out of it. If you produce some metrics around how many people are at various levels in your ladders of engagement, you'll be able to see where people aren't able to take the next step. And then you can think about, why is that? What's happening there? Why can't we move them from just signing a petition to actually organizing their friends to sign? Oh, they've never done it, and they don't have any materials that tell them how. So you can start to produce brainstorms around what you need to do to make it easier to take the next step up the ladder of engagement. And that doesn't have to be just online engagement, it can be offline as well. So let's do the next slide. Oh, sorry, yeah, that's me. Okay, so bottom-up technical requirements. So your current systems, you probably have several, a lot of you, and they are actually a wealth of information about the requirements for the new system. Unless you're going to not do that function anymore, it tells you how you're currently doing it, and it probably provides a lot of stuff that the software designer or the CRM implementer is going to need in terms of the fields you're collecting right now on your forms, in terms of understanding what your data is being used for. Oh, we have to take our MailChimp subscriber information and migrate it into Razor's Edge, and we do that every month. Well, we're supposed to do it every month, but it only happens twice a year. And so there's a pain point, getting that stuff migrated from one place to another. I would also suggest paper forms. Some organizations have large membership forms that have tons of information about special interest groups, and you probably also have paper sign-up sheets at some of your events, and you will probably want to identify what you've been asking people there. I like to think of pain points as something that really needs to be fixed soon. So I ask people who are wanting some CRM services from me, what is it that is bothering you about your current way of doing things, as well as what they're aspiring to, what they're hoping for. That provides a lot of information about where they're spending a lot of resources. We have 3 people who are entering checks every day, all day long, and we'd like to automate that process somehow. Once again, this is a bottom-up statement. Remove stuff that's no longer used. Don't migrate useless data. Don't say just because we might use it, we used to use it 3 years ago, it might be helpful. That's not a good enough reason to bring it all over. Stop doing some stuff. Save yourself some time and hassle. So there's pros and cons for in-house versus consultant. Always use me, a consultant on that. If you can do it in-house, it's usually much less costly because you have to pay for my computers, my advertising, my office space, and all that kind of stuff. Your own in-house people, they're going to understand your existing systems. They're going to know the people better, know your needs probably. They might not be as out of the box at understanding what you could be doing, but they will have a very solid understanding of the current system and what is the immediate need. They're going to need to operate the new system, and so if they build it and get it going, they're going to be on top of maintaining it. The one problem is they may have existing work responsibilities that make it so they can't get it done. You might have to shift their workload somewhere else. Consultants are generally an expert either in CRM or websites. They might be an expert in Nation Builder or some other product that's in this sphere. They're probably also very used to software development and organizational change projects. Some of them are going to be way more on the technical side, especially those who are servicing the smaller organizations. If you've got 100 people in your organization, you might occasionally work with management consultants, and so some straddle the line between the two. CRM implementations, a big one is not like starting to use MailChimp. It's going to affect a lot of your organization and your workflows, your work processes, your data, and so it's large, it's complex, it's going to take some time, and it's worse if it doesn't work. You can just switch from MailChimp to some other emailer, but your enterprise systems, you can't just switch to another one. There were some famous, very large companies who had disastrous multi-million-dollar failures moving to SaaS and other products in the early 2000s. Trying to put together a plan where you're identifying and reducing risk early on is a good idea. It's also a good idea to take bite-sized pieces where possible. Instead of trying to get it all perfect, have a 2-year development cycle, and then boom, we're going to start the new system April 1st, new fiscal year, and it might not work. So one of the rationales for the agile development methodology that I was mentioning earlier is often by the time these large systems get into use, the requirements are no longer the same. And so trying to scope down is a good idea for different phases. Different ways of choosing what comes first. You might say we're going to switch out this system, then we're going to switch out the membership system, then we're going to do something else. You probably want to build in some early wins so that some of your high priority new functionality or your really awful pain points are addressed early on. And also maybe choose something that you can experiment with and identify any risky things and try and come up with plans to mitigate that risk. You need training for everyone, especially if it's back office complicated workflows. You need to plan on ongoing technical support. These are enterprise systems, and you shouldn't consider even on a free and open source software like Sugar can be and Subi CRM is, that it's free. It's free like kittens, not like beer, as they say, which means that you have to feed the little kitten. Stuff comes out the other end. You have to deal with that, and it grows up. And you have to manage it. You have to take it to the vet when it gets sick. So it is a bit of an effort. And so often with open source, although there is evidence that open source in certain areas like CRMs, apparently it can be lower cost. It shouldn't be considered as free, never going to cost you anything. If you try and do it all yourself, you might be fine, especially if your needs are simple. But you're going to be spending your time, your valuable time as well, using this. I'm almost done. Actually, I am. So now, I'm done, but you're not. Any questions before I get you doing an exercise? Should I take questions now?
That's fine.
Okay. Yes?
I work with a very large system called IMIS,
Yep.
Are you familiar with it?
Yep.
And one of there are a couple of issues that you haven't touched on. One was security. And it was so important that only certain people can see certain data.
Yeah.
So that hasn't been touched on.
No, I'm skipping a
And
lot
I'm
of
just
things.
wondering if now most of the systems cover all of that, or if there's a real difference. There's a couple other things too. One is-
Let me take them one at a time.
And can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so I need to repeat the question for those of you on screen. And I was being asked about security and permissions for these systems, and because it's very important, are all the systems the same? Do they all cover it just as well? Is it not a consideration anymore? Actually, it's because my talk is very compressed. I haven't listed all the different things you need to consider. I would say that it's very important, and there are differences in how it's implemented that can make it easier or harder to manage. Most of the time now, there is something called roles-based permission management systems. Access control lists is another. And so that allows you to say, these volunteers are able to access this functionality. Maybe you'll restrict the Ottawa chapter to only looking at Ottawa contacts. You might restrict your finance and fundraising people. They're the only ones that can look at the money and donations, and the volunteers aren't allowed to look at that. So that's one. Another is you need to make sure, because these are normally online and exposed, that they are getting security patches regularly. That's part of the care and feeding. Anyway, I'll stop there. Yep.
The two other topics were integration with something like Dynamics, so that you can take your donations right into your bookkeeping, or whether you have to do something to get it. And the third was the reporting, because it was one thing to get the data in, but a whole other thing to get the correct data out. So
Yeah. The first question was about integrations. I should say that CRMs are often, their primary function is as a data repository for all the contact information and all the transactions. And it might be that other systems are looking after those other transactions, whether it's doing the email or maybe events management. And so they need to integrate with those other systems. One important integration is with bookkeeping systems, accounting systems. And so I tend to think of the CRM as similar to an accounts receivable system for many types of accounts. It might not be in charge of getting your foundation check, which is due received, but it's going to look after all of the pledges, all of the donations and everything, the payments for your membership system. So in terms of integration, some of them will be plug-in. You can just turn it on. You can use a WordPress plugin or a Drupal module to integrate with external services, or it may be available in the form of API sort of programmatic level interfaces that make it easy to integrate. And that's one of the benefits usually of CRM open source. They'll often have what's called an API that is useful. So I think in terms, I don't know if there's more to be said with regard to the accounting integration. You need to be able to integrate so you don't have to enter everything twice. You don't want to have to retype the information about the donations you've received into another system. Yeah?
A simple thing question. You have your information in Excel or an Outlook. Can you use that data to go into a CRM?
It depends a little bit on the application. I would say that, to repeat the question, if you have information, data in Excel sheets, for example, or in Outlook, how do you manage migrating it or keeping it in sync? I would say that CRMs are a good way to wean people of the bad habit of keeping Excel spreadsheets. It's an aspiration. People are still going to do it. What you can normally do is you can export from Excel into a common format called CSV, which they can all import from. And more importantly, though, you want to make sure that the reason that that person started to have their own worksheet for their use is met by the new system. It might be that they needed to arrange the information in a different way, and so you might use whatever Excel spreadsheets are out there in the wild in the organization as a starting point for your reporting requirements. You might want to get the system to be able to produce that spreadsheet for them as an export or as a printed report. With regard to Outlook, it's a little harder. So there, most of these systems will have bulk or mass email capabilities, so you go into them and then you can send out your subscriber, your newsletter to all your subscribers. But going back to the idea of a CRM as capturing all the interactions that your organization has with someone, there are benefits to that, because that means that if one staff person does it and another gets a phone call later, they'll be able to find out what happened with this person. If that person gets hit by a bus or goes on to a new and great job, you want to not lose all of their memory of what they were doing while they were working for you. And so capturing those interactions, those emails, is useful. Some of these systems will allow you to have emails that are going to and from Outlook automatically be captured in the CRM system and filed with the contact, and that can be quite helpful. It's also very nice to be able to make available the contacts in the CRM to people using Outlook or some other email, and then you have a single source of truth about all of your contacts, and it only needs to be updated in one place. So some of them will expose contacts in a form that can be used by Gmail or Outlook or whatever client you have. And there's security implications there again. Yes. Are there any other questions from others? I want to keep moving it around. And then I'll come back to you, okay? Yes?
Are most CRMs accessible online, or do you need to buy like a server or host it somewhere?
10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was more client-server. So they were back office systems, so staff would use them. Nowadays, most have the ability to expose something through a web page, and many of them are software as a service. So that means that you can just pay a monthly fee and it's going to be there in the cloud for you. Some of them allow you to also install it on a virtual server that you buy or you host in-house. Any other questions? I want to get to this exercise. How am I doing for time? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah?
Really simple. I know you're not, don't want you to say this, but if you did have an Outlook, like 15,000 addresses, any one that you would recommend going to?
You mean in terms of a CRM?
Yeah.
That's a whole other talk. Of course, Civi is the best. No, it actually, I don't want to say that it is. It really depends on a lot of other things about your needs. If you're just doing a subscription list, use MailChimp or some other email management service. If that's all you're doing.
Yeah, that's all we're doing.
Yeah, you don't need a CRM, but I bet that you're soon going to be doing some other things. That you're probably not just doing that. And so in the last couple of weeks, I'm working with a new organization that's getting funding from the Canadian Internet Registry Authority. One of them is online right now. Hi, Glenn. And so they are trying to get started and do things right from the beginning. And so they wanted to get set up with a CRM system to manage their email subscribers and their donations and everything else, so that they don't have to, in a year, pull together their Excel sheets and all their other ways of doing things.
Sorry, I just couldn't hear the name of the company. Was it MailChimp?
Yeah, there's lots of, if you look up email management service, I keep saying MailChimp, there's several others that aren't coming to mind right now that also do similar sort of stuff. I'm going to open it up to the room, and I'll try and get someone from each table at least to tell us something about their own answers or something they found interesting about someone else's answers at their table to each of these questions. What was, given the organizational mission, an important public-facing, so for your users, CRM functionality that you wanted? This table first.
Newsletter subscription.
So newsletter subscription. So it wasn't there yet, or you wanted it improved or to be integrated more?
Improved and integrated.
Okay. So normally CRMs should be able to put up a little block, a widget on your website, and I would suggest there's various disputes about this, but just email is really good if you just want more numbers. But sometimes, given how you want to use it, the information, getting first name, last name, email, and postal code can be useful. If you're a national organization, the postal code lets you know lots about the place they're from, their MP, other things like that. And with their name, you can start doing more in terms of interacting with them. But every field you add, especially required fields, you get fewer people doing it. This table here.
I think we misinterpreted the question.
Oh.
Yeah, but
well, how did you try to answer it?
I was more on the newer, better integrated part, so I was thinking more from the staff side of things. But I think one that our constituents would like to be able to be in touch with each other more easily, and we like know where they all are, but most of the connections end up being made, you know, personally, like staff, people physically connecting different key volunteers, and we don't have a way that they could somehow plug in and be like, oh, I can find out who, you know, we work with churches, so like who are all the people who do like finance stuff in the congregations.
So just to repeat for the people online, the desire was to not have the staff people at the center being responsible for all this one-way interaction back and forth, or two-way interaction with all these constituents outside the organization. Let the people who have shared interests or shared locality get together in different ways. Community of practice model for the financial officers for Trinitarian churches? Unitarian. My Catholic background is hitting it. That's one. Another one, another model that's been quite effectively used by the Stephen Lewis Foundation is to have little groups of people organized together to work. I think it was grandmothers helping grandmothers. Another group that has letter writing parties is Amnesty International. And so trying to do online and offline, as well as facilitating interactions amongst your constituents, is a great idea. There was someone talking to me earlier about doing this with Drupal and organic groups. They wanted to facilitate discussions of committee members. And so there are modules that are a little bit more oriented towards your content management system generally that help in the discussion kind of functionality. But another area that is quite relevant is if you manage to get their postal codes, then you can allow people in a particular area to make invitations to events in that area. And so that's a way to start allowing people to invite those near them to an event. And that's more of a CRM functionality. Next table.
If I understand that question.
Oh, how do you want to answer it?
So public-facing CRM functionality. The charity that I run is we loan cottages to cancer survivors. So we have a stream or a database where each owner has created a profile of their cottage with pictures and all the data. But we have two different databases to send the family that we're loaning the cottage to that picture, or that URL or whatever for that profile. So maybe integrate that somehow so that it can be accessed. I'm not quite sure where we go with that.
Yeah, so the question is, we've got a resource. In this case, it is cottages, and a need, which is a family that is a cancer survivor, and we want to match them appropriately. And so it might be that there's 5 people in the family, you want a cottage that's big enough for them. And so that's actually a fairly difficult and standard problem, doing matches. And so sometimes it might be you want to match volunteers with volunteer roles that match their skills. They have to be certified for something. And so because it's not completely standard, and you probably have something around the description or matching system for cottages to families, you might have to do that custom. And so then when you're thinking of your CRM, you want something that allows you to customize it or allows you to tweak something that is close to what you want. So I do Drupal stuff. There's a Mercy module, which was for reserving resources, like rooms. And so you might be able to customize that somehow. So I think it's an interesting kind of problem, and it's not that unusual when you're dealing with, you know, your organization's needs to find that off-the-shelf stuff doesn't quite work perfectly. And that's where you have to look at customizing. Sometimes you can configure something and work around it. Sometimes you have to lay out some money for some custom development. this group here?
The first thing they do, they ask the exact same one about their constituents working together, so
Okay.
I have to make up one on the fly. Oh, he's waiting for the first one. Okay, he's good. Allowing contacts to manage their own contacts.
Okay, so the question or the desire here is to allow contacts to manage their own contacts. So there's several levels to this. One is where you're trying to do a viral fundraising campaign like Ride for the Cure, where you allow people to set up their own page, enter their friends and family, and then they email their friends and family inviting them to come look at their reason for doing something and sponsor them. So that's one thing that's pretty customized and polished for that special area. There's another whole level where your organization might have chapters, and you want the membership secretary for a particular chapter to be able to view and edit the contacts and maybe financial information about her contacts or his contacts, but not the rest of the organization. So this happens a lot with national organizations that have provincial chapters or political parties that have riding associations. And there you want not just to have rules-based permissions, but to allow that to be specified just for a particular group. That is something that some CRMs will provide, but not all. In a more sales-oriented context, you might have a sales manager responsible for sales reps who have their own territories, and the territories have their prospects. So it's a common CRM need, but they implement it in various sorts of ways. Next table.
So what we figured out after we had a discussion was that, we run a nonprofit a little bit up north of Toronto in the region, and we work with young people with developmental disabilities. We run a recreational program for them. So for us, at this point, I think we're too tiny for our CRM. So for us, I think CMS would be more beneficial at this point. But we would be still looking for probably donations as like our primary public facing.
Or you might be able to, so the concern was the organization is very small, doesn't have a large contact list. They run a program for developmentally delayed or challenged children, recreational program. And so they weren't sure that all the bother and expense and effort involved in a full CRM was worthwhile. So you need to make sure that there is a need before you bother. I would say that if you can get by with something less, it might make sense. You might also find that you can get by with using a CRM and turning off a lot of its functionality. If you're using it just for donations, that might be good right now, and then later you can start doing a newsletter if you end up doing a newsletter. I would say though, in terms of a new organization just getting started, it is probably a better investment normally to have a website, and so a CMS is a good place to start. Some of these things would also have registration modules or membership modules that might help you with managing the enrollment in the program, as well as getting donations. The back group there?
Yeah, I guess some of the current pain points at the charity that I work at is we've noticed that there's some financial metrics on the fundraising side we'd like to improve. Some of these key performance indicators, and the fact that all of our data exists in silos is sort of the cause for that. So we think that a CRM could really help solve some of those issues.
So the concern is at the charity mentioned they are worried about data silos and about improving some metrics on their fundraising. If you go to Chapter 2 of Using City CRM, which you can download now, there is stuff about creating a baseline and a bunch of ideas for metrics. And the fundraisers are better at this than the volunteer managers. And so maybe it was because they have numbers and everything. And so you want to make sure that there are some standard reports and or the ability to pull out metrics like this for your organization. And I should say, with regard to reporting, you want to make sure that there is a good slew of existing reports, and it's essential that you have ad hoc reporting and the ability to do flexible reporting. It's always going to be necessary to do something different. That's one of the areas that's very, very variable between organizations. So in City CRM, some standard things that make sense to fundraisers and development officers, but not the rest of us, are SciBunt reports and LIBunt reports. So last year, but not this year, or some year, but not this year reports. There's also support for things like soft credit, where the board member who solicited a major donation is credited with finding the donation. Or you don't want to bother the spouse of someone who just gave because you want to treat the household as a unit. And so if the wife gave $100, you don't want to ask the husband for 100 more, because it's just going to peeve them off. There's several other uses for stuff like soft credit, where a person who has an ability to determine the donation made by a foundation is credited with soft credit for the report, even though the foundation, it gets the hard credit and gets the tax receipt. So there's lots of special things. I would strongly encourage developing baseline metrics that allow you to see where you're at right now and review them every 3 months or 12 months and see how you're doing. City CRM and other ones will have dashboards which will provide graphical charts and so on of how you're doing on these important metrics.
So if I can just make a suggestion, because like this is a really great presentation and we've had a lot of great discussion. We also want to be conscious of people's time. It is a work night. So we know there are still 2 more points. So if you have time and you would like to speak with Joe, we invite you and welcome you to stay a little bit longer to kind of go through these points. If you're tight on time, please feel free to get more food and then you can go on your merry way. Before I let you guys go, I do want to thank Joe for taking the time to speak with us. So here's just a small token of appreciation.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Joe. And if you guys have any other questions for Joe, please feel free to stay behind. He'll be here maybe.
I'll be hanging around. I'll be hanging around, and so if you have questions about other stuff, you don't have to come with your answers.
Or you could.
Yeah, it was to prompt discussion.
And
Thank
then
you
if
very
you have
much
any
for your time.
questions, yep. If you have any questions about next Tuesday, you can feel free to talk to Tierney, Yale, or myself. Okay, thank you. Okay.